Good day, class. Today's topic is justice as fairness, based on John Rawls' A Theory of Justice. So I gave you a reading in the VLE, which is a chapter on Michael Sandel's book, The Case for Equality. So this presentation will be based on that and John Rawls' primary or original work, A Theory of Justice. So make sure that you have read the reading as you follow this presentation. So the main topics and questions that we will be discussing for this presentation is another notion of justice, which is based on the idea that we can make a society or we can create a just society. So it is part of this part of the course where we discuss justice as treating people the way they deserve to be treated, which will be discussed in Aristotle later on. And then justice is treating equals in relevant aspects equally. So how do we define equality in terms of relationships of people, in terms of society? And then lastly, is it possible to imagine a just social arrangement that is not socialist in its orientation? So this is a very crucial question. We did not discuss socialism in this course because of the fact that we had to trim it down for the remote learning setup. But if you meet socialism in your other courses, it's actually looking at um, a social arrangement or a society wherein it is more just, it is more equal, because everybody gets the fruit of their labor. Uh, and in essence, everybody is equal until the time where communism will be the mode of production, the system of the system wherein you have no government and essentially people are all equal. So the question that Rawls asked here is kind of continuation of that debate and also a continuation of the debate of the social contract, because we will see later on that he will also be talking about contracts. So that's why it's important that you know about the social contracts, the classical theorists at least, so that we better understand the idea of Rawls behind his idea of justice as fairness. So the following are the objectives for this section of this course. So one is to identify the elements of Rawls' theory of justice, and next is to apply Rawls' idea in critiquing redistribution policies. So we have discussed taxation in libertarianism, noting how libertarians do not like that the government has a big role in the lives of private citizens, and thus they want the labor of each to be, and the fruits of such to be attained solely by individuals. Meaning, if you work for something, then you should get it. Okay, Rawls has a different idea, so we will be comparing that later on. Okay, so the first question that you will see asked in the reading that I gave you is that, are contracts always fair? Okay, so in the social contract part of or section of the course, we discussed how the social contract defines justice as um, the making and also the recognition of covenants made or compacts or contracts made that culminate ultimately with the contract of a society to a certain individual, for example, for Hobbes, the Leviathan. So that's what justice is in the social contract. So now Rawls wants us to look back at the very idea of the contract. And for example, in your everyday life, do you have ideas or examples of what is a contract? Or do you have contracts or kind of transactions that you enter into, okay, with these elements considered. Like for example, if you want to buy a thing, okay, if you want to buy a thing, you're given a receipt. Essentially, it's a contract. Okay, it's um it's a contract wherein there are unwritten rules wherein you pay money, real money, to attain or to get something, and then they will give you the real thing. Like for example, if you bought um if you bought a laptop that is branded, then the contract is that you should be given the real thing, the real branded thing, and then you're given a receipt as a recognition of that contract, so that if there's something wrong with your unit, then you can go back and uh, claim that that the store did not give you the thing, the real thing. Okay, so in a simple contract or in a simple situation like that, you see these elements that are very important in justice. Like for example, agreement. Okay, so in that situation, you buy something, you agree, right? You agree to the terms, you agree to the price of the thing. Okay, so related to that is consent. Okay, so you consent for them to get your money, you consent for them to um to give you the product. Okay, and then there is also an obligation, okay, that you are obliged to pay, and the other party is obliged to give you the money that to give you the product. Okay, and then both of you have benefits. Okay, so another contract would be, for example, if you borrow money from a friend. Okay, so if you borrow money from a friend, again, it's an agreement. Okay, so you borrow this amount of money, the other party consents to giving you that money, and then there is an obligation for both parties where you, as the one who borrowed the money, will give it back at this time, given that you talked about that. And um, the other party is obliged to give you the money that you need now. So in Rawls, I would not discuss in detail, but he discusses another situation wherein um, these elements can be seen. And again, in that situation, there is a benefit to both of you. Okay? So the benefit is that for example, your friend will have you as their friend for a long time, okay, or longer, now because of this act of generosity, okay, act of kindness, and you, again, you will have the money that you need, and again, another part of that is friendship, okay? So, anyone who enters into contracts are autonomous, okay, also another part of the contract, meaning that you make your own decision. Okay, and another idea is that it's reciprocal. There is reciprocity that is in the element of benefit or obligation, because you do your own end of the bargain. So given all of these, um, Rawls is asking us, are contracts always fair? In every contract, do we agree, or do we see, do we recognize that there is always agreement, consent, obligation, or benefit? According to Rawls, contracts are not always fair. Okay, so I have mentioned a while ago the idea of autonomy, and you have met this idea in libertarianism and in Kant's notion of justice. Okay, so for example, Kant categorically notes that we have in autonomy. Libertarianism would also say the same, that people have autonomy, meaning that they can do whatever they want to their own property, to their own bodies. Okay, so you can make your own decision. Okay, and when you enter a contract, it should be reciprocal so that there will be benefits for both parties. We have discussed that in the previous slide. But according to Rawls, contracts are not fair because not everyone is autonomous. So he focuses on this idea called the fair start. Okay? So for example, in lending money, one person can take advantage of another person with a high interest because this person is poor and needs money. So for example, you think about another person. Like for example, in the present, there are many schemes where you can borrow money. So for example, there's this online apps wherein people can borrow money, but they these apps add so much interest to the money that, like for example, if you borrow 5,000 pesos, ang makukuha mo lang is 3,000, but you need to pay the whole 5,000 in this amount of time, like for example in less than a month or 2 months. And then the result of that is that first, of course, you borrowed money because you needed some. And then you borrowed money, and then the end of it, you owe more money. And then if you're poor, like for example, you do not have really a stable source of income, then there will be long-term long-term effects. Okay, so um, people enter into that contract with, of course, with little information. Some with more information than most, but some with little information. So there are news that these apps use the data from people's mobile phones. Okay, and then essentially they can contact you, and then they can contact and trace you, and then they can also contact and bombard your friends or family messages when you don't pay your loan. Okay, so for other people, for example, if you have a stable source of income, you do not need to enter into this kind of contract. Okay, another example that not everyone is uh, has a fair start, meaning that's the fair start kasi. Like for example, if initially you're poor, or initially if you have more information. So if you have more information, you have the privilege of having access to information, knowing that these apps are predatory, okay, or these apps are um, getting money from people in an unethical way, then you won't um, you won't enter into that contract. Okay? So, according to Rawls, we do not have a fair start. Okay? And fair start actually also does not just involve information, but it also involves privilege. Okay? Thus, agreement to such contract is not necessarily fair because the poor person will just consent to this because they need the money badly. So this can also be applied to other contracts, such as the contract that we have for social arrangements, such as how we live in a society. So yes, other theories of justice may agree that people have autonomy, that we have reason, that we can decide on our own, but there are circumstances in life that make us vulnerable to being uh, taken advantage of, especially in terms of contracts. Okay? So, isang example lang yung mobile lending apps that people are actually using them because they need money, and also because of lack of information then. Okay, so contracts therefore are not always fair. So therefore, Rawls is now looking at how to make contracts, specifically one of a social contract. How do you make that fair? To reiterate, Rawls says that contracts are not fair and they are not self-sufficient moral instruments. Why is he saying this? He is saying this as a response to the social contract theorists, meaning you cannot say that something is just because the covenant or the contract is being recognized. Okay? We need to look into the elements that goes into the contract. Like for example, may pandaraya ba, may panloloko pa na nangyayari doon sa nasasabing doon sa kontrata. Okay, so meaning he also questions here the idea of a social contract. How do you know that the power that you have relinquished or given to a leviathan or a government is being used properly? Or how do you know that that power that you give to the government will not be used against you uh, as a form of injustice? Okay? So you give power to the government to maintain peace, but in maintaining peace, you saw that they kill people, they red tag people. So is that a contract that is just? So Rawls basically questions that. Have we made a society wherein we can say that everything is just, that our lives in this society is just? So at the end of it, Rawls says that no, we do not live in a society that is just. Okay? So therefore, his theory of justice in his book, A Theory of Justice, is primarily concerned with describing, okay, the basic structure of society or the kind of institutions that we need to have in a society that is just. His goal is a well-ordered society that can be made through fair contracts. Okay? So these are two of the major ideas in Rawls' theory of justice. So what is a well-ordered society according to Rawls? So if this is the goal of his theory of justice, then what is it? So a well-ordered society simply is a society that is designed to advance the good of its members, meaning it is a society that recognizes that its members should be living happily, living in a society that is just. So according to Rawls, in order to have a well-ordered society, it should be effectively regulated by a public conception of justice. What is a public conception of justice? In a society that is well-ordered, everyone accepts and knows that the others accept the same principles of justice. And the basic social institutions generally satisfy and are generally known to satisfy these principles. Okay? So, saan nanggagaling si Rawls dito? Nanggagaling siya sa idea na tayong mga tao, we as people, do not have similar or one notion of justice. Okay? We have established that at the beginning of this course, that we do not have a single notion of justice. Why? Because we come from different backgrounds. We come from different we have different biases, prejudices, okay? And therefore, we have seen life in a slightly different in a different way than than each other. And when asked about a simple question, for example, the moral or the ethical dilemmas that we discuss in the lifeboat problem and in the trolley problem, okay, when we are faced with our principles, we have different principles. We choose different things. Okay? So, Rawls would want a well-ordered society to have a similar people or the population in a society to have um, a similar idea of justice. Okay? That there is acceptance of say acceptance of some principles of justice. We can say that these are values, okay? No, because we can have different ideas of what is right and wrong, but there are still some universal things that we do not accept as humanity, right? So cultures may be different, but there are some things that are universally good, right? So in a society, Rawls is saying that they should have a public conception of justice, meaning we should strive to have a value that we all value. Okay? So for example, in a democracy, we should value freedom, equality, uh, liberty, okay, in a democracy. So it's assumed that if you're a citizen of a democratic country, you also value these. You also value the freedom of other people. You value them as equals. Okay, so that's the kind of idea that Rawls is going for. So you may also ask, but don't we have a well-ordered society today if that is the criteria that Rawls gives us? According to Rawls, no, because our notions of justice are arbitrary distinction of relevant aspects of desert or merits. Some are valued at a given time, some are given naturally. So, what does he mean? Remember the idea of the fair start. Okay? In a society, we are not born from the same families, the same kind of families. Okay, income pa lang, syempre iba-iba na 'yan. But culture, family culture, um, the language that we speak makes us very different from each other. And our notions of justice, when we ask each other maybe, we will see that some of it are very arbitrary. Okay, for example, what does your society value? Remember distributive justice. Okay, so this is a question of distributive justice. Remember distributive justice. What does our society value? Do we value beauty? Definitely, because Filipinos are very hyped when there is a Miss Universe competition going on. We have a representative. Okay. Do we value money? Do we value popularity? Do we value kindness? Okay. What is the reason why um what is the reason why we follow influencers? What is the reason why certain people are more wealthy than others? Is it because they have different talents than us? So we accept generally in a society that it's acceptable that actresses, actors, models are paid more than the average uh, minimum wage earner. No, because they're beautiful kasi they are they're beautiful, they're talented. Okay. For example, we recognize the efforts of for example, K-pop idols training for many years until they debut, and then uh we think that they deserve all the money that they get, the fame that they get because they worked for it. Okay? So again, we do not have the same idea. Meaning, I may think that, but you may not think that. Okay? So our notions of justice basically is, we can see that in our notions of distributive justice. Who do we give the fame, the money, the attention to? What are their characteristics? Okay? So, in a neoliberal society, we will be, we will, some people will say to us that it's because of their hard work. Like Elon Musk is very, very rich because of his hard work. But he is unlike other businessmen or other businessmen who, yeah, started from scratch. Now he may claim that, but he did not. It's the case that we did not have a fair start. Meaning, he had rich parents. We did not. Right? So, Rawls is also saying this, na our society today is not well ordered because one, we do not value the same thing. Okay, we do not have a public conception of justice. And also that we value different things. Like sabi dyan, some are valued at a given time. Like for example, this stereotype of beauty is valued in the 1980s but not right now. Okay? Some are given naturally. Some people are naturally beautiful. Some people are born into wealthy families. Some are naturally gifted in some things. So they excel uh, excel in some things later in life. Like, for example, if they're gifted as children, right? So people in a society do not have a fair start. And in in doing so, and in having that situation, in the end, we do not have the same benefits for the society. And therefore, we also have different ideas of justice, or uh, ideas or principles of justice. What is needed according to Rawls is a proper balance. Okay, a proper balance of these principles that I have mentioned a while ago. So why is it important to have a public conception of justice? Because our society is affected by our notions of justice, particularly the coordination, efficiency, and stability of a society. Like, for example, uh, now the recent debates on whether or not you should vote, for a thief, a son of a dictator. Okay, these conversations that are happening are actually reflecting the idea of justice that we have and how different it is for different people. Okay. Even though we have the same information. Okay, even though we have the same information, for example, or same experiences, same history books taught to us in elementary school. But now kasi we have different sources of information, and some of them are uh, very lacking. No, some are not complete, some are really just misinformation. Okay, our society is affected by this notion of justice. Why? Because eventually we will have a country that is led by someone who is not just not qualified, but also represents the bad side of our society. Okay? Like, for example, also the drug war of the Duterte administration affected our society, our institutions. Because the idea that drugs is the only problem that our society has drowned all the other issues away. They cut budget from many different departments. Okay? And also, in doing so, they also affected people's perceptions of these departments, of the role these departments or these commissions have to our government. So as you can see, our notions of justice, especially when aggregated, affects our society, our institutions, our coordination, our efficiency, our stability. Our country is nowhere near stable, especially now in the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the very ideas, the very values, the very principles of justice that is running this government. So therefore, we need a public conception of justice. And this public conception of justice should not or is not solely based on distributive justice, meaning this should not just be based on who gets what and does what they get uh, is what they get something that is just. Okay? So what does he mean by that? We will be discussing that in the next few slides. So Rawls' theory of social justice is not just the distribution of wealth, the distribution of talents, etc., that we value as a society, but the distribution of fundamental rights and duties. What do we, in our public conception of justice, what do we need to, what do we need as rights? What do we have rights to as people? And what are our obligations? Okay, so you know that those are always pairs, right? That if you have rights, you should have duties also. Okay, so there should also be divisions of advantages from social cooperation. So say that we have a well-ordered society, and then our society will be very efficient, will be very just. Then we will get benefits from it. Remember the idea of the contract. Okay, but how do we divide that? Okay, so Rawls will be talking about that in a bit. Okay, so Rawls' very idea of social justice or a well-ordered society starts from a contract. Okay, so imagine that you're in a room. Like for example, we're not in we're not using the remote learning setup. We're in a room, okay, a dark room, and then we're talking about that. Like there are many people. Like for example, there are 20 people. 20 people. This could be your this could be your classmates. Okay? So imagine that, and then imagine that we will be talking about the well-ordered society. So what do we want in our society? Okay? What do we want the public conception of justice to be? What do we want as the main value of our society? Okay? Um, how do we distribute rights and duties? And do we divide the benefits of us cooperating or the benefits of this well-ordered society? Okay, so according to Rawls, it begins with this original position of equality. Okay, equality in many justice theorists is kind of defined differently. For example, for Aristotle, it's not really equality. Okay, or for example, Socrates, because we have discussed Socrates, it's not really equality in the sense that everyone is equal, but everyone has a role to play in a society, and that's equality for him. For utilitarianism, equality is just counting one person as one. Okay, so what is equality for Rawls? Okay, equality for Rawls is uh, starts here with what he calls the veil of ignorance. So again, remember we're in a when we're in a for example, we're in a round table, we're in a room, okay? In this room, we talk about the well-ordered society, but we should have a veil of ignorance, meaning we do not know who we are, we do not know, maybe we know our names, but we do not know our backgrounds, if we are wealthy or poor, if we are studying in UP or not. We do not know who our family is. Okay, so that's the veil of ignorance. You do not know your position in the society, if you're rich or poor. Why is this important? Because again, remember, contracts are not fair. Contracts are not fair if you do not have a fair start. Okay? For example, yung pagbili kanina ng laptop, pwede kang maloko doon kung hindi mo alam yung specs ng laptop na bibilin mo, na nagoyo ka, na anong tawag dyan, na binentahan ka ng, for example, 4 gig RAM lang na laptop for, kapresyo ng isang gaming laptop. Okay? Kasi hindi mo alam yung mga presyo, you do not have information. You do not have, both of you in the parties do not have a fair start. Okay? So therefore, yung agreement, yung consent, those are all nullified and those are all unfair according to Rawls. So paano magiging fair yung contract? Okay? So dun sa situation kasi na yon, you're, 'di ba, you're both dun sa situation na yon, you both have different backgrounds, you have had a different start. So for example, matagal nang nagbenta sa'yo ng laptop, alam niya or nakita niya na wala kang alam. So he took advantage of that. So yung mga ganong alam niya is coming from his background, his experience. Okay? So yun yung i-strip. Those are the things that we strip from us in this contract that we are making now for it to be fair. So you would not take advantage of your position in the making of decisions on what kind of society you will have after the contract. Why? Because if you're rich, you will take advantage of it, right? So if you're rich, you will want a government that is pro-rich. Okay? You will want a government that does not tax you. Okay? If you're poor naman, you will fight for whatever benefits that you will have for that society. Okay? So, veil of ignorance. We do not know what we are. I don't know that I am a teacher. You don't know that you're a student. You don't know that this is the income of your family, that this is the allowance that you get every month. Okay? And what does that, why does that matter? Okay? Remember, we're distributing rights and duties. Okay? So, kung alam mong mayaman ka, you will be saying na, ayoko yung duty na yan, babayaran ko na lang. Or, ayoko yung responsibility na yan, ibigay na lang yan sa mga poor. Ganon. So, under this veil of ignorance, okay, we are assumed that we are free and rational persons. So, yun yung assumption. So, bago ka pumasok sa room na to, you are a free and rational person. And they are mutually disinterested. Actually, mutually disinterested and self-interested at the same time. You would want self-preservation, of course. You would not want to die in a society wherein you will be living after that agreement. So, pagtaos dito sa room na to, we will be making this well-ordered society. Okay? So, after that, kung ano yung agreement nyo dun, you should follow or recognize it after leaving that room. Okay? So, that's the idea. Okay? So, this is the original position. Yan yung ibig sabihin ng original position. Okay? So, what do you mean by mutually disinterested and self-interested? That they will argue for what they think benefits them after the contract is made. So, therefore, this is equality. We are equal. We do not know what our backgrounds. And we are also equal in terms of the opinions that we will have, the ideas, principles that we will field or suggest in this position of equality. And according to Rawls, this will make the contract fair. So, ano kaya yung mapag-agrihan ng isang tayo? What can we agree upon in that situation? According to Rawls, we will agree upon something that is fair because the beginning of the contract is fair. Unlike other contracts that are unfair because we do not have similar level of information, similar backgrounds, dito sa original position, we have a chance to have a contract that is fair. So, ganito daw yung mangyayari from the original position. So, you agree upon something, okay? And then, what will you agree upon? You will agree upon a definition of terms or association or the distribution of rights. You will also regulate future agreements, meaning this contract that we will have will regulate future agreements. Kind of like we're doing a constitution because a constitution regulates the laws that could be made, right? So, all our laws should be consistent with the constitution. So, parang ganon. When we agree here, our agreement will be followed by following agreements. And then we will specify the kinds of social cooperation. How do we help each other in this society? Okay? A well-ordered society, remember, is one that has a public conception of justice. Okay? So, paano nakakatulong yun? Or paano nakakatulong yun sa paggawa natin nung idea kung paano tayo magtutulong-tulungan sa isang society. And then, eventually, we will establish a government. That is the purpose of the original position. Okay? So, we agree, and then we establish a government. But, in establishing a government, kailangan mo muna tong how would you distribute rights? How would you regulate future agreements? And how would you specify kinds of social cooperation? Okay, so why the original position of equality? So before we go to what we will agree upon, according to Rawls, it's because, again, of the moral arbitrariness of our notions of justice. We have different ideas of justice, and some of these are just arbitrary. Meaning, we just came into this world and saw these things and eventually followed them. But actually, we do not know where this came from. Like, for example, the social contract. One critique to that is that, paano yung next generations ng mga ano? If this is a hypothetical situation like this, what we're doing here is a hypothetical situation. What about the next generations of the social contract? Do they also agree? What if they don't agree to the social contract that gives the Leviathan powers? So, it's really very arbitrary. Okay? And, there is an original position of equality kasi ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, we do not have a fair start. Okay? Social positions in our society today, determined by institutions and other factors, present especially deep inequalities. Okay? That is what Rawls is critiquing in his work. That the world right now is very unequal. So, also, the original position of equality makes us think about, yun nga, a rational choice. Because rational choice means that it's consistent with the things that Rawls said a while ago. That in the original position, we are self-interested. We just want the best for ourselves. And then, that interest that we want for ourselves will eventually lead to better outcomes later on. Okay? Because, and also, if you do not know your position in life, the outcomes will be better because you will be forced not just to think about yourself but also of other people. Okay? Because you will say, what if I am poor? And if I agree on something that is anti-poor? Okay? So rational choice is going on or is in process when when you start from the original position of equality. So what will the people agree in the contract? So these are just questions. Would we choose from a utilitarian perspective? Meaning, would we only make a society that is best for the majority? Okay. Or do we choose from a libertarian perspective? Would we choose to not tax the rich people? Okay. Would we choose a society wherein we say that uh, you will get something if you work hard? And so, yeah, think about that as we go to the next slides. According to Rawls, what we will agree upon is the following. 1. Equality in the basic assignment of rights and duties. We will agree that everyone should have the equal rights and duties. Okay, so that's basically simple that what walang lamangan. Okay, we have similar rights. So for example, if you're a citizen, you have the right to vote, you have the right to participate in political activities, and that's also your duty as a citizen. Okay, another is social and economic equality. So here he introduces what he calls the difference principle. So before defining the difference principle, uh, here is a slide summarizing how the original position is fair according to Rawls. So according to him, it conveys the idea that the principles of justice are agreed to in an initial situation that is fair. Okay, again, this is different from the other contracts that we enter into, wherein we do not have a fair start. So here, the initial situation, everyone else is equal, we do not know our backgrounds, that is fair. So therefore, when the process is fair, then the agreement will be fair. So it's also a kind of procedural justice wherein we agree on the process and the process is fair, and therefore the the end the end point or the outcome is fair. So therefore, ayan, agreements from the initial original position is fair. Okay? But I want to highlight here that justice is not equal to fairness. Okay? Meaning uh, justice here is in the process and also in the result of the process. And that is how you say justice as fairness. Okay? Meaning but it's not enough that something is fair. Okay? It's not enough that something is fair. Meaning the process should be fair also. Okay? So how do we illustrate that? Again, with the buying thing. That when you buy something, you get a receipt, okay, you agree, that is fair, right? The contract is fair, na because you accept all things. But if the process is not fair, meaning may panlolokong naganap, then that is not a just contract. Okay? So there are caveats on defining how something is fair or something is just. Okay, so what is the difference principle? So the difference principle, according to Rawls, is something that we will agree upon in the room. Meaning kung tayo-tayo daw yung nag-uusap doon, we will be agreeing upon this. So what is it? So according to him, Rawls notes that inequality in the society is permissible only if they work in favor of the disadvantaged in the society. Okay, so this is where the distribution comes in. Okay, according to Rawls, in the original position, we will not, even though we do not know our backgrounds, we will know that after we leave the room, there is still inequality. Meaning, some of us will be richer, some of us will be poor, some of us will have beauty that can be uh, used to get riches also. Some of us will be talented, some of us will be very intelligent. Okay? But, since that is a reality in the society, okay, and the Rawls, of course, would want to be realistic in his philosophy. Okay. After that, according to him, sige, we will allow those inequalities. Yes, we will allow other, kasi we cannot make people the same naman, right? So we cannot make people all, you know, soulless human beings without passions, right? So we will recognize that there will be inequalities in a society. But they will only be permitted if they work in favor of the disadvantaged in the society. Again, we're distributing rights and obligations, diba? So an example of this is that if you are rich, like filthy rich, like a billionaire, okay, in a well-ordered society, that riches of yours, that wealth of yours, regardless of however you got it, should be in favor of those disadvantaged in the society. What does that mean? We tax you, okay? We tax you, and your wealth will be redistributed to the society, especially those who are marginalized. According to Rawls, that is what will be agreed upon. That's the difference principle. The difference of us, of anong tawag dyan, of sectors in the society, of classes in the society, will be remedied through redistribution. Okay? So if contracts are unfair and people have unfair advantages, meaning ito yung unfair, hindi siya necessarily bad. Okay? In this discussion, you should have known that already. That unfair is not necessarily bad. Like, for example, some people really are more talented than others, more intelligent than others. Okay, of course, there's the element of effort. So that's one critique to Rawls' idea of justice. Of course, there's the element of effort, but we must accept that people are very different. Okay, so it's unfair. Some people have an unfair advantage. So therefore, to remedy that, to rectify that, okay, we will take some of the benefits that these people have from the society. Kasi sino ba yung nagbibigay ng fame, ng sweldo, ng, for example, kay Pacquiao, sino ba nanonood ng mga laban niya nung siya ay very sikat pa na boksingero? Sino ba? 'Di ba ang mga tao rin? So nanggagaling sa mga tao. So according to Rawls, it is just right that you give it back to the society that gives you those unfair advantages. Now, because some advantages kasi is based on societal values. You value beauty, you value intelligence, right? So that's why it's kind of a social justice. So yes, you're rich, but we redistribute your riches, your wealth to the disadvantaged ones because they have had an unfair start in the society. They do not have rich families. Okay? So for example, if this person wants to be a businessman, to have a startup business, but the business man does not have rich parents like Elon Musk, or yung mga may-ari ng mga main industry sa Pilipinas, ng SM ganyan, na maipapamana lang sa kanilang mga anak. So kung wala siyang ganun, the government uh, could fund, for example, the Department of Trade and Industry to help businessmen, okay, business people to start their business from the taxes that we get from wealthy people, from people who had more benefits in the society. So in the end, walang mapag-iiwanan, right? Because even if you're born poor, oh yeah, the government knows that you're poor, then you're entitled uh, to get help or to get benefits from the government itself that redistributes the wealth. So it's similar to a kind of a social democratic government, wherein uh, you are given benefits from the government. Welfare. No, welfare is also a part of the role of the government. So the difference principle is like that. So, according to Rawls, this is the only way that the contract we make to create a society is just. When we treat the things that make more people advantage as belonging to the community as a whole. So that's also one aspect of it. Now, you're born pretty, you're born rich, okay? Part of your earnings, part of the benefits that you will have is also the ownership of the community. So therefore, you should return it to the community. So yes, you will still have riches, but you must allow the government to redistribute these riches to more disadvantaged people in the society. Okay? So these are safety nets for people so that they would not be forced to enter into contracts that are essentially unfair. They won't be forced to enter into loan contracts that are unfair. They won't be forced to study uh in they would not be forced to work while they're young and just study. Okay. So also this will lead to better institutions. Why? Because the government be will aim to have, for example, a public school system that is best. Okay? So that people will not have to be poor so that they could go to uh, prestigious universities. Okay? So I saw this argument going around that um, there are many youth right now that are not studying or um, that are going into UP. Okay, basically UP, PUP, no, because of free tuition. Okay, but there are other courses, there are other universities also giving quality education, but it's just that they cannot afford it. And they are going to these universities because yun nga, of supposedly quality education, because our public universities are not at par with the performance, for example, of the University of the Philippines, which is very elitist if you if you think about it. The university is elitist. Okay? Na yeah, you have this entrance exam and then you have free education. No, but it has a budget that is not shared by other public and state universities and colleges around the Philippines. So it produces more inequality. It produces more unfair start. For example, for UP students, when you go to the workplace, makikita agad UP. But does not mean that we are any better than our peers in the state universities, di ba? But sabi nga dito sa difference principle, if this is followed in a society, okay, the idea is that you will have very quality education na because na-redistribute nga yung wealth, hindi lang siya natetenga sa kaban ng mga politiko okay, at kaban ng mga, yun nga, mga wealthy individuals. That, weirdly, these wealthy individuals are always being protected or the opinions of people is that, hayaan mo nga siya, pera niya yan. Diba? Even when, for example, Jinky Pacquiao is flaunting their wealth in the midst of a pandemic. Hayaan niyo yan, pera niya yan. Okay, hayaan niyo yan. Pinagtatanggol ng mga taong ito as if, di ba, may naitulong sa kanila. Which is weird. Because, yun nga, the wealth of these people, according to Rawls social justice, should be redistributed. So that, there are no people in the society who would think of, going into, for example, going into contracts, going into debt, so that they can have a good education, they have good healthcare, okay? So that people, for example, will not remember, for example, the series Squid Game. Why do you think people went back after the first game got canceled? Why do you think they went back? Because they have no choice. And this lack of choice is the inequality in the society that the difference principle is trying to remedy. So if there is a difference principle, if there is a well-ordered society, they would not even need to go back or to go to the Squid Game, for example. No, because their society is already taking care of them. Okay? So this idea is absurd to many people. Why? Because helping other people is absurd to many people. Okay? They don't think that we are entitled to these benefits just because we are just citizens. No, so those are the things that are being tackled here in Rawls social justice. So these are some critiques to the difference principle. Is it desirable or just? So you may ask, what about effort? Hindi ba magiging tamad na lang yung mga tao if, for example, the poor will just stay poor because they will be taken care of by the government from the moment they're born. Okay, again, this goes back to the elitist notions of many people that I have seen in many conversations, which is very alarming. So, you know that, I don't know what area it is, yung sa mga pabahay ng gobyerno na maganda, na condo levels, village, subdivision levels, yung ganda ng mga bahay. Then, people were saying na nagrereklamo kasi yung mga tao doon na mataas daw yung renta, ganyan. Kasi nga nanggaling sila sa mga areas na hindi naman sila nagbabayad ng renta. Tapos ngayon, napalipat sila dito because of a reason. And then, yan nga, nagrereklamo daw sila. Okay, so, on one hand, of course, I would understand because these people do not have stable sources of income, ganyan. Okay, and then, but you see the comments, the conversations happening na, parang, hindi nyo naman deserve yung ganyang kaganda na bahay, na, it's usually coming from the middle class, na, you always hear that we made it far. We were poor before, but we made it far because of our education. We went abroad, okay, so that we could have this nice house. Sabihin nila, buti pa kayo, meron kayong bahay. Kami, kailangan pa namin magbayad ng renta, kailangan pa namin magbayad ng loan dito sa bahay, pero kayo may bahay na, tas nagrereklamo pa rin kayo. Ganyan. Alam niyo yun na pero, the thing is, yung middle class and these people who were given houses are both victims of inequality. Parehas itong sintomas ng isang lipunan na hindi nag-aalaga sa kanyang mga mamamayan. Hindi ba? The middle class had to work their way up because there are no safety nets. There are no other at least then, di ba? There are no other way so that you considered well off unless you have a good education. Siyempre, yung good education na yan, very dependent din yan sa, for example, yun nga, kung matalino ka, siyempre, makakapasok ka ng UP, makakakuha ka ng scholarships. Para kung hindi? Hindi ba? So, kakakita ko lang din kanina yung isang post, pero nakakita ko na rin dati, na sa Pasig, na they also give assistance to students na hindi parang yung hanggang pasado lang, ganyan. Na mabababa yung grade, pero mahirap, ganyan. Na may assistance din para sa kanila. So, hindi lang bina-value yung mga estudyante na matataas yung grade. Diba? So, here, I don't know, we will have different answers here na in a society like that, hindi ba magiging tamad na lang yung mga tao? Another example that I could think of is the 4Ps. The middle class is very they have very strong opinions against poor people getting 4Ps. And poor people using their 4Ps for other things such as ang nakikita ko pang papareband ng buhok, syempre yung pagsusugal, iba naman yun. Pero, alam niyo yun, yung mga wants rather than needs. Again, aren't they people? They are people who have wants, not just needs. Diba? But, yun nga, the argument is very elitist. Because, galing daw yan sa gobyerno, galing daw sa taxes ng mga tao, hindi daw nila pinaghirapan. Okay? But there are also people who also have wants and needs. Ito yung mga hindi nako-consider in our current society that the difference principle is trying to fix. I'm not saying that the difference principle is like all good. Diba? And very, very desirable. But it makes some good points about how our society right now is very unequal. Again, I just want to reiterate the idea of the difference principle that rewards some reap in the market genetically, yun nga, by being naturally pretty, naturally talented, gifted, or economically, no, na naturally also gifted in business, etc., belong to the community as a whole. Okay, it's not the ownership of one individual, unlike libertarianism. So this is very different from libertarianism. So that's one major idea behind the difference principle. So, final slide is about moral desert and entitlement. So, justice is not rewarding virtue or moral desert. So, according to Rawls, justice is not about that. We are not rewarding virtue or moral desert. Meaning, diba, when we have discussed the justice in previous lectures, it's always about justice about the greatest happiness of the greatest number, or in the beginning sa trolley problem that there is a possibility that when you save 5 people, that is just and that you will be rewarded later on. It's not just about that. Okay? Justice is what we are entitled to. It satisfies our legitimate expectations as founded upon social institutions. This is what is different from Rawls. He defines justice in the context of the society. Justice is what we are entitled to. We are entitled, meaning we just not, pag sinabi mo kasing desert or deserve, we deserve it. Okay, we deserve it because we are good people. Okay. For example, for Kant, if you remember the previous lectures and the reading, people deserve things because they are people. Okay, it's a categorical notion. Like, for example, we deserve to live and not be an instrument to another person's will or person's purpose. We cannot be an instrument for other people because we are people. Inherently, we have human rights. Okay? So, that's something that we deserve. Justice is something that we deserve. So, Rawls is giving us another view that justice is actually what we are entitled to. When we say something is entitled, we are entitled to something. it means that we get this entitlement from something. Okay? Pag sinabi natin, for example, student, University of the Philippines student, what are you entitled to based on your enrollment in the university? You are entitled to get grades at the end of the semester. That's your entitlement. You are also entitled to support from the university because you're actually students of the university. Saan nanggagaling yan? Sa mandate ng university. Okay? So, as citizens of the Philippines, what are we entitled to? We are entitled to certain rights. Okay? And also to certain responsibilities based on our constitution. So, doon sa dalawang example na yon, may pinanggagalingan yung entitlement. So, justice is what we are entitled to according to Rawls. Why? Because, again, remember our hypothetical situation a while ago that we discuss, we're in a room, we're discussing a well-ordered society that we will build. And after that, after we get out of that room and go on with our lives, we are beholden to the agreements that we did in that specific conversation, in that agreement. Okay? So, yung agreement na remember, kanina, inihalin tulad ko siya sa isang konstitusyon. Okay? Na ito yung mag-guide sa ating mga batas later on. So, if we agree on something, if we have a contract, and if that contract is fair according to Rawls, fair in terms of the initial start, the fair start, and then the process is fair, and then the results are fair, then we are entitled to it. Okay? Meaning, paglabas mo ng room na yon, paglabas mo ng society na yon, ito na yung society na dinatnan mo, you are entitled to the benefits, expectations on the social institutions in that specific society. Meaning, kung may difference principle, mahirap ka, paglabas mo pala ng room, ay, mahirap pala ako. You are entitled to support from the government. Okay? That is your entitlement. That is justice according to Rawls. Okay? So, yan. So, those are the things that we need to look for or to highlight in Rawls' notion of justice. So, if you have questions, you can send it through email or chat or through our next synchronous session. Thank you very much for getting this far in this presentation. Thank you.